Okay, so welcome back to Fitness in the Kitchen. I'm experimenting a little today. So given some of the protein balls that I've already made, I am using some of that knowledge and terms of like proportions and different ingredients that have worked well. And I'm just going to try and make something that is going to be vegan and nut-free. So it's going to be a vegan-based protein. It's a blended protein. You're going to have chia seeds, some psyllium husk, which is really good to add texture, but is basically pure fiber. So even though there's carbs, the net carbs is like close to none, because there is a decent amount of carbs in the vegan, but again, it's plants. So it's almost like when you're eating cucumbers or vegetables like that, they're not starchy carbs, so they're good sources of carbs, and again, more fiber, which is gonna really aid in a healthier digestive system, help make you feel full, and also regulate insulin so you don't get those like blood sugar spikes and then drops, which cause those cravings for sugar and things like that and make you hungry. I'm also going to use honey as the sweetener. I find that works best. Cinnamon and vanilla, just because I really love those flavors. The unsweetened cocoa for the chocolate. And then I'm going to use coconut oil as something to kind of make it a bit softer. Sometimes protein balls are really dry or they're too liquidy and they don't stick together very well. So these are some ingredients that I'm going to use. And then of course some Himalayan pink salt. So just to really help pull out flavors, but this is a really good source of salt that doesn't really have the same effects as a lot of other sodium, so it doesn't cause water retention or anything like that, which normal salts that you will get from the store will often do that. So usually what I like to do is start with some of the dry ingredients and also making things like the protein that are in a powder form more into a bit of a liquidy kind of form. It's just easier to add other things to create the right texture that you want. So I've already done a lot of proportions in my head, so I kind of have a good idea of amounts and things like that that I want. So for the vegan blend, I'm going to use half a cup. And I'm going to add the cocoa here. So it's almost going to make like a chocolate protein by adding the cocoa to it now. Really, it doesn't totally matter. You can add it at any point. And normally a tablespoon. So for like a full batch, a tablespoon is usually enough. If you're making a bigger batch, do 2 tablespoons if you want it more chocolatey, cocoa-y. But remember, cocoa isn't the same as chocolate. Chocolate has your sugar and milk and stuff usually involved in that too. And then, so let's go. I'm going to add the water now to make it a little bit more liquidy. And then I'm going to use the psyllium husk and the chia seeds because they absorb a lot of water. So I'm going to use those as kind of to help get the right texture that I want. And then this way you can kind of let it sit sometimes, especially with the chia seeds. You can make it a bit more liquidy. I sometimes will let it sit in the fridge and then it kind of hardens a bit and is a better texture to make balls out of. But usually I just kind of go to the sink and add like a little bit of water. But I'm just going to use this. You can kind of see how much water I'm actually adding. And usually just doing a little bit at a time. I'm just going to use a small whisk here. So I want it to be fairly liquidy at this point. So I'm going to add a bit more. Because when we add the psyllium husk and the chia seeds, it's really going to absorb a lot of water. So there's probably maybe a quarter cup of water, something like that. Yeah, maybe a quarter cup or half a cup. I'm making it pretty liquidy. And see how there's like a chunk in there. I just want to get that out. So you want to basically get all of the stuff dissolved and stirred up into the liquid mixture. So I can see there's still some solid chunks. I'm just going to keep going until it's pure liquid form. There we go. So it's really liquidy still because I'm going to be adding other things to help make it not so liquidy. So I'm going to add the cinnamon and the vanilla now. I usually do about like a tablespoon or so, or not a tablespoon, a teaspoon or so. But you can just kind of sprinkle it in your desired amount. And then for the vanilla, a teaspoon is also usually perfect. If it's a smaller batch, maybe half a teaspoon. All depends on what kind of flavor that you're going for. And then the salt, I don't put a lot in, so I just do a little bit. It's like a sprinkle of salt. And then I'm just gonna stir that all up. So that's all I need the whisk for, because once I start adding the chia seeds and the psyllium husk, it's going to get a bit more of a solid texture. So I don't want it to get all stuck in the whisk. Okay, so normally 1 to 2 tablespoons of the chia seeds is good, and then the longer you let it sit, it's really going to solidify a lot more. So I'm going to start with 1 tablespoon. And then the psyllium husk, I'm going to do anywhere from half a cup to a cup. So this is where I'm going to just start with the half cup. And then you can use like a spoon or a fork to mix it up. It really doesn't matter. So see, it's already starting to really get into a more solid texture. So it'll be much easier to kind of form balls out of, and then you can put them in the fridge and they will usually harden. And then what I'm going to do with the honey and the coconut oil, so I'm doing a tablespoon of each. I'm going to melt it a little bit so it's a bit more of a liquidy texture to add in, because my honey is starting to get a little harder, so when it comes out, it's almost like that crystally paste. And then obviously the coconut oil is a hard texture. So just a small little glass bowl to add these into. There we go, so a tablespoon of coconut oil. And then for the honey, you can use like maple syrup or stevia if you want lower sugar. But for this one, I'm going to go with the all-natural honey. Yes, there's sugar, but there are some really good benefits to honey as well. And a tablespoon is usually perfect, so it's not too sweet. If you have more of a sweet tooth, you can do 2 tablespoons, but keep in mind that's going to be more sugar. So if you want to keep the sugars lower in the recipe, then you want to go with that. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll add a little bit of stevia if I find it's not as sweet as I want it, but usually I don't want them super sweet because I want it to be like a little snack. But if you're looking for more of a dessert thing, then maybe you want it more sweet. So I'm just going to put this in the microwave for about 10 seconds. Just to get it a bit more of a liquid form. And then I'm going to add it in, stir it up. Okay, so this should be okay. So things like coconut oil, sometimes they'll still look like a bit of a solid, but if you have it in something else, because it's warm, it will melt down. So all of this is melted down. So again, that was 1 tablespoon of honey and a tablespoon of coconut oil. mix it all in here. Now you want to mix it really good because you want all of it to get the honey and the coconut oil for the texture, but also the taste. And if you're not a fan of coconut, not to worry, you won't really taste the coconut oil. You won't have that coconut flavor because it's not a lot, and there's so many other things in here to make it taste really good. So I'm just going to do a little test to kind of see how this comes together. That's really good. So see how it makes a ball, no problem. It's not crumbling or falling apart, but it's still fairly soft. So that's really good. Now, in terms of serving sizes, you can make bigger balls or you can make smaller balls depending on how you want it to be in terms of a serving size. So I'm going to get a cookie sheet and some wax paper. And then, so I usually like to make about a spoon size, so they're small, something to kind of snack on. You can just kind of grab it throughout the day when you feel like something. Now, you do always want to sample a little piece to see how it tastes. So, this one's not very sweet at all. It's just got a little bit of a sweetness, but nothing noticeable. So if you're looking for something a little bit more sweet, I would either add another tablespoon of honey, or you can add a little bit of stevia, which I think I may do. I want these ones a little bit sweeter. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try out these stevia packets. So on the box it says that 2 teaspoons is 1 packet. So 2 teaspoons, we would probably want to do something like maybe not quite a 1/4 cup of sugar in terms of sweetness, because we did add a little bit of honey. So maybe, so a 1/4 cup is 6 packets. So let's do 3 packets. And see how that goes. Now, because we want this to actually dissolve, I'm going to put a little bit of water in here to dissolve the sugar into. And then I might need to heat it up. It might dissolve a bit better if I do heat it. So let's see how this turns. So I'm going to do 3 packets, which is just over 2 teaspoons. Which, when you think about it in terms of baking, in a recipe, 2 teaspoons is nothing. So keep that in mind. But we did add the honey already. Now, let's see how this turns out. Now see, it's sucking up a lot of the moisture already, so I'm definitely okay adding a little bit of water there. But what you could do as well is get a little bit more of the coconut oil. Keep in mind that it is a healthy fat, so this will increase the calories a lot when you're adding more fats, but it's a healthy fat, so it is good. Just keep it in mind in terms of like your macros and your calorie in, calorie out kind of thing. But it's still a really good snack. And then I always kind of keep track of all the ingredients and the measurements, and then I will do all the math and figure out the calorie breakdown and the macro breakdown of this recipe. But again, I am just experimenting, so you get to see what this looks like. Let's see. Oh yeah, so that's a good texture. But I'm going to taste it. Much better. So that little bit of stevia that we added was perfect. It's not overly sweet, but it's kind of got that little sweetness just to make it tasty. I am sometimes more of a sweet tooth, but if you have snacks that are not so sweet, then you're not going to crave the sweet stuff as often either. So one thing I can kind of tell right now is it's on the verge of being crumbly. So I can just put them in the fridge and see what happens. Or, like I said, I could add something like a bit more coconut oil. I'm going to see what happens because I don't want to add any more. So I'm just going to make a few balls. I'm making them about a spoonful size. So this is also important to track. You want to count how many balls you make because that's how you're going to find out the serving size. So when you do the math, you add up all the ingredients to get the total calories, carbs, fats, proteins, and fiber and sugar. Those are the things I always add into my macro count when I'm doing recipes to find out. And then this way you divide the total by how many balls you made. And then it gives you a good idea of the breakdown for each size. Try to make them as similar in size as possible because obviously you're doing the math on the serving size. So it is a little crumbly, not ideal, but the taste is good, so I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to add too much. And in terms of the sugars, it's really just the honey, which was a tablespoon divided by, this is probably going to make 2, 4, 6, 8. This is probably going to make 15 to 20 balls by the looks of it. I'm going to go a little bit bigger, so I'm going to add some of these. So maybe use like a tablespoon, like a bigger spoon when you're making these. Again, these ones are not for people with sweet tooths. So if you really want a sweet tooth, dates are a really good base as well. I've made a chocolate coconut one that had dates and it was much more sweet. So if you're looking for the sweet tooth ones, you know, dates are really good. A little bit more honey, and then like I did, you can do partial honey and then partial stevia. Stevia is a really nice plant-based natural sweetener that does not have sugar or calories. So it's fantastic for these kind of recipes. So even though it's a little bit crumbly, it does hold together nicely when you kind of mush it into a ball. So I made them a little bit bigger, probably get closer to 15 or so, but we will see when I'm done. It looks like 15. All right, that was a good guess. 15 balls. The last one's a little bit smaller, but almost the same size. So I made 15. So I'm going to put them in the fridge for a little bit just to see if they change texture and get a little bit harder so they don't get all crumbly. I can feel they might be a little crumbly though, but that's okay. Okay, let's see how they turned out. So they're definitely still solid, which is good. Not super crumbly, which is also good. Not overly sweet. Not very chocolatey. So I maybe would put 2 tablespoons instead of 1 tablespoon of cocoa. Overall, pretty good. And now it's on the verge of being crumbly. So again, I would probably put a little bit more either chia seeds or coconut oil, depending on which way you want to go. And then while they were sitting in the fridge, I did the math. So with this specific recipe, each ball, so there's 15, is 44.6 calories, 1.4 grams of fat, 4.9 grams of carbs, 3 of those being fiber. So 3 grams of fiber, pretty good. Almost equal to the amount of carbs, which is kind of ideal if you want a lower carb snack. Sugar, only 1.2, and protein, 3.2. So I usually try to get the protein and carbs to be as close as possible because the carbs are pretty much all fiber. That's actually really good. So the net carbs is only 1.2. So the protein almost doubles the net carbs. So this is pretty ideal. And the sugar is only 1.4, 1.2. So really low sugar. Again, because I used that stevia, it would have been a little bit higher if I used 2 tablespoons of honey instead of 1. But again, you can use your discretion. That's pretty low, so it would only have doubled that to 2.4 grams of sugar if you did 2 tablespoons instead of 1. So again, it's still fairly low. You definitely could do 2 tablespoons of sugar instead of adding the stevia. That's your choice. And if you were okay going a little higher fat, you could do the coconut oil to change the texture a little bit. And again, add more healthy fats if you want more healthy fats. Or if you want more protein, you can use egg whites instead of water as the liquid. Keep in mind that that will absolutely change the texture as well. So yeah, those are some tips to do protein balls. That's kind of my method to my madness and how I do it. I definitely want the taste to be good, the texture to be good. You want them to hold into that ball texture. So if I keep these out of the fridge, they might turn a bit crumbly. But again, by using the coconut oil, a little more of that, you can help that. And also using egg whites instead of water does help that as well. So I would probably personally use the egg whites next time for this. It will make the texture a little bit better. It will solidify a bit better in the fridge, and it will also increase the protein. Egg whites is literally pure protein, so the protein amount will go up as well. So I'm going to probably try a few tweaks to change it, but overall, not a bad protein ball, and it took me super easy, no time. But if you want more tips, if you want to hear me try some different ingredients, maybe you're trying to play around with them, give me a shout, comment below, and let me know what you want to see next.